In recent years, the global soybean trade has undergone a notable transformation, as several countries have shifted their procurement preferences from American soybeans to those cultivated in Canada. This change has been driven by a complex blend of geopolitical tensions, supply chain adjustments, and evolving consumer demands that highlight sustainability and quality. While the United States has long been the dominant player in the soybean export market, Canada has steadily risen in stature, attracting attention for its consistent quality, non-GMO offerings, and reliable trade partnerships. This development is not only a reflection of changing international priorities, but also a case study in how agricultural markets adapt to broader global shifts. Before we start, please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more updates. One of the clearest catalysts behind this trend was the US-China trade war that began in 2018. As tariffs were imposed and retaliated upon, China, a major importer of soybeans, reduced its dependency on American agricultural products. Though some of the friction has cooled in subsequent years, the disruption in trade patterns gave rise to a new status quo. Importers worldwide began seeking alternative suppliers to mitigate geopolitical risks. Canada, with its stable political climate and favorable trade agreements, emerged as a preferred partner for several countries. Its soybeans, though smaller in volume than those of the US, are often seen as higher in protein content and produced under stricter environmental regulations, qualities that appeal to a modern, health and climate-conscious global market. Japan, one of the world's most discerning soybean importers, has become an enthusiastic customer of Canadian soy. Japanese buyers are particularly focused on soybeans used for tofu, miso, and soy sauce, products that demand high-quality, food-grade beans. Canada has gained their trust by offering clean, traceable, and non-genetically modified soybeans that suit traditional Japanese processing methods. While the US had historically dominated the Japanese market, an increasing proportion of this trade is now moving northward. Farmers in Ontario and Manitoba in particular have tailored their crops to meet these niche needs, developing strong partnerships with Japanese food companies and demonstrating the power of specialization in agricultural trade. South Korea has similarly increased its soybean imports from Canada in recent years. With a growing demand for health-conscious foods and plant-based protein, South Korean consumers have been quick to adopt soy-based diets beyond traditional staples like doenjang and kongnamul. Canadian soybeans, known for their high protein content and excellent taste profile, have found a solid market here. South Korea's government has also expressed interest in diversifying its agricultural imports to reduce over-reliance on any one country, making Canada a strategic choice. The reliability of Canadian logistics and the lower risk of trade disruption compared to the US further bolster this pivot. The European Union, particularly countries like the Netherlands, Germany, and Belgium, has seen a growing influx of Canadian soybeans. This region is especially sensitive to environmental and ethical concerns in agriculture, and Canada's focus on sustainability has aligned well with EU values. Several Canadian soybean producers adhere to environmentally friendly farming practices, often under third-party certifications, which offer assurances to European buyers that the products meet rigorous standards. Furthermore, Canadian soybeans are frequently non-GMO, an essential requirement for many European food manufacturers and consumers. With increasing demand for plant-based meat alternatives and dairy-free products, the European market's appetite for high-quality soy is growing, and Canadian suppliers are well-positioned to meet that need. Indonesia, the world's fourth most populous country, has also ramped up its purchases of Canadian soybeans. Traditionally a significant buyer of American soy for products like tempeh and tofu, Indonesia started diversifying its imports in response to fluctuating US prices and periodic supply chain disruptions. Canadian soybeans, often perceived as cleaner and more consistent in quality, have gradually taken a larger share of this market. Canadian exporters have made concerted efforts to understand the Indonesian market, investing in relationships with local distributors and processors to ensure that the product fits local culinary and industrial applications. With the country's burgeoning middle class and rising demand for plant-based protein, Canada stands to benefit from long-term trade expansion with Indonesia. Taiwan presents another compelling example of this shift. As an island with limited arable land, Taiwan is heavily dependent on food imports, particularly for essential commodities like soybeans. Though long a consumer of U.S. soy, Taiwan has increasingly turned to Canada for its supply. Part of this has to do with the reliability of Canadian shipping lanes and less exposure to global trade bottlenecks. More significantly, Taiwanese processors have praised the purity and high moisture resistance of Canadian soybeans, which enhance both storage and processing efficiency. Taiwan's focus on food safety and premium agricultural inputs makes Canadian beans a desirable alternative to their American counterparts, especially in niche applications such as baby food and organic products. Vietnam, a rising star in the Southeast Asian economy, is another country that has shifted its sourcing strategy in favor of Canada. With a rapidly expanding food processing sector and growing exports of soy-based products to other Asian markets, Vietnam needs a consistent and high-quality soybean supply. Canadian soy fits the bill, offering a reliable stream of premium food-grade beans that align with Vietnam's increasing demand for raw materials and value-added food production. Canadian agricultural exporters have taken notice, engaging directly with Vietnamese processors to tailor products to their specific requirements. Trade missions, technical support, and collaborative R&D efforts have helped solidify this trade relationship, positioning Canada as a long-term partner in Vietnam's agro-industrial development. Underlying all these shifts is a growing global emphasis on traceability and sustainability in agriculture. Canadian soybeans are often traceable back to the individual farm, an appealing feature for companies looking to bolster their environmental, social, and governance (ESG) credentials. With climate change top of mind and consumers becoming more educated about where their food comes from, sourcing soybeans from a country known for responsible land stewardship and transparent supply chains is becoming a competitive advantage. American soy, while still dominant in volume, has at times struggled with perceptions of heavy pesticide use and less stringent environmental regulations. This contrast makes Canadian soybeans more attractive to countries aiming to align their imports with consumer ethics and governmental policy. Logistics and infrastructure also play a pivotal role in this shift. Canada's grain handling system is among the most sophisticated in the world. Its ports, particularly Vancouver and Thunder Bay, have invested in modern handling facilities specifically for soybeans, allowing them to move large quantities efficiently and maintain product integrity throughout the journey. Coupled with Canada's strong rail system, this infrastructure ensures a reliable and predictable supply chain, key in an era when even brief delays can lead to multi-million-dollar losses for food processors. This logistical efficiency has not gone unnoticed by global buyers, many of whom have expressed a preference for Canadian soy due to fewer disruptions and greater transparency. Another important factor is the Canadian government's proactive approach to trade diversification. Programs led by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, in collaboration with industry groups like Soy Canada, have aimed to open new markets and strengthen ties with existing ones. Trade missions, quality assurance campaigns, and multilingual promotional materials have helped showcase Canadian soybeans to a global audience. The result is a more visible presence in international markets where Canadian soy once had little or no footprint. This strategic outreach has helped cement the perception of Canadian soy as not just a substitute for U.S. beans, but as a premium product in its own right. It's also important to consider the impact of currency valuations. The Canadian dollar tends to be less volatile than the U.S. dollar and often trades at a lower value, making Canadian agricultural exports more competitively priced. For countries looking to balance quality with cost efficiency, this financial factor adds another layer of attractiveness to Canadian soy. Even when prices are on par, the added value of higher protein content, better traceability, and perceived environmental benefits make the slightly higher cost worthwhile for many buyers. In a market where margins are razor thin, these qualitative advantages can tip the scales in Canada's favor. Another country that has increasingly turned its attention toward Canadian soybeans is Thailand. Historically, Thailand imported large volumes of soybeans from the United States and Brazil. However, as the dynamics of global trade have shifted and concerns around sustainability and supply reliability have gained importance, Thailand has diversified its sources. Canadian soybeans have emerged as a favored option, especially among food processors who emphasize quality and purity. Thailand has a growing market for soy-based products, including soy milk, tofu, and fermented soy sauces, all of which require clean, consistent, high-protein soybeans. Canadian exporters have capitalized on this demand by promoting their identity-preserved soy programs, which ensure that specific soybean varieties are grown, handled, and shipped separately to meet niche processing requirements. What sets the Canadian approach apart for Thai buyers is the robust quality assurance embedded within every stage of the supply chain. Soybeans destined for Thailand are often inspected under rigorous guidelines, both by Canadian regulators and by Thai import authorities. This level of diligence reassures processors that what they receive aligns with their expectations for purity and quality. Canadian exporters have also invested in outreach efforts in Thailand, including educational seminars for soy product manufacturers and food safety agencies, ensuring that local businesses understand the specific advantages of Canadian soy. As Thailand's health-conscious population continues to grow and plant-based diets expand in popularity, Canadian soybeans are expected to see even greater demand. India, a country with deep culinary traditions rooted in legumes and plant-based proteins, has become another notable buyer of Canadian soybeans. While India grows its own soy, domestic production is often insufficient to meet the increasing demand driven by a rising middle class and an urban shift in dietary preferences. India's food sector has rapidly industrialized in the last 2 decades, with the rise of packaged foods, vegetarian convenience meals, and a booming dairy alternative market. This shift has created opportunities for soybean imports, especially those of a higher grade than what local farms typically produce. Canadian soy, with its clean processing, non-GMO certification, and reliable protein levels, fills this gap effectively. One particularly important aspect of Canada's appeal in the Indian market lies in its adaptability to religious and cultural expectations. A substantial portion of India's population observes dietary restrictions based on religious guidelines that emphasize vegetarian purity. Canadian soybean exporters have catered to this sensitivity by offering highly traceable, contamination-free shipments that are ideal for use in vegetarian food production. Moreover, Indian manufacturers producing soy flour, soy chunks, and even fortified children's foods have praised the functional properties of Canadian soy, particularly its ability to retain texture and flavor in high-heat processing environments. This has further entrenched Canada's position as a soybean supplier of choice for a wide range of Indian industries. Turning toward the United Arab Emirates, the Gulf nation has become an unexpected but significant importer of Canadian soybeans in recent years. With limited domestic agriculture due to arid conditions, the UAE imports nearly all of its plant-based protein sources. Its role as a logistics hub and re-export center in the Middle East means that soybeans arriving in the UAE often find their way into other markets in the region, such as Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Bahrain. Canadian soybeans have been gaining traction not only for direct consumption, but also as a core ingredient in regional food processing plants and feedstock manufacturing. Canadian soybeans' consistency and premium quality are particularly important in a country like the UAE, where there is a heavy emphasis on imported high-end consumer goods. Health-conscious expatriates and increasingly aware local consumers are looking for transparency in their food. Food safety authorities in the Emirates have stringent import protocols, and Canada's clean labeling and supply chain traceability have helped it stand out among competitors. Additionally, as interest in plant-based diets rises in the Gulf, Canadian soybeans are being used in a growing number of vegan and vegetarian food startups headquartered in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. These businesses, often targeting both domestic and export markets, demand ingredients that meet the highest global standards Canadian soy consistently meets. In Mexico, a country that shares a continent with both Canada and the United States, the rise in Canadian soybean imports presents a particularly intriguing development. Traditionally, Mexico has relied heavily on U.S. soy due to proximity and the sheer scale of American production. However, Canadian soybeans have begun to gain a foothold, particularly among manufacturers producing soy-based oils and specialty foods. The North American trade landscape, shaped by agreements like the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, has provided Canadian producers with streamlined access to the Mexican market. Yet, it's not just trade policy that's fueling this shift, it's also the changing preferences among Mexican food producers. In recent years, Mexican companies have expressed greater interest in soybeans that are free from genetically modified organisms and pesticides, an area where Canada has a competitive advantage. Canadian soybeans have thus become increasingly popular in the production of organic and health-focused food products, including soy milks, meat substitutes, and nutritional supplements. Moreover, environmental advocacy groups in Mexico have pushed for more responsible agricultural sourcing practices. With Canadian farms often exceeding these expectations, especially those adhering to environmental certification programs, the shift toward Canada is both logical and strategic. The fact that Canadian soy arrives via efficient and well-regulated trade channels adds further appeal to Mexican buyers looking to ensure consistent supply and quality. Egypt, one of the most populous countries in the Arab world, has emerged as a noteworthy importer of Canadian soybeans as well. With limited arable land and a rising demand for affordable sources of protein, Egypt has long depended on soybean imports for both human consumption and animal feed. While the US and Brazil have traditionally dominated this market, Canadian soybeans are making inroads, particularly in sectors where premium quality and food safety are paramount. Egypt's urban centers, including Cairo and Alexandria, are experiencing a demographic shift that mirrors trends seen across much of the developing world. A growing middle class, rising health consciousness, and a burgeoning market for processed high-protein foods. Canadian soybeans are now being used not just in animal feed, but increasingly in the food manufacturing sector, where the demand for non-GMO and clean-label ingredients is steadily rising. Egyptian soy-based product manufacturers have expressed appreciation for the high protein content and low impurity levels of Canadian soy, which help reduce waste and improve production yields. Furthermore, as Egypt works to modernize its food safety infrastructure and align more closely with international standards, Canadian soy fits naturally into this framework. The presence of Canadian trade delegations and agricultural outreach programs in North Africa has further cemented these connections, providing Egyptian buyers with both technical support and confidence in long-term partnerships. In Philippines, the demand for Canadian soybeans has grown in tandem with a population increasingly drawn to plant-based alternatives and a food manufacturing sector eager to meet that demand. The Philippines, while having some domestic soybean cultivation, cannot meet its internal consumption needs and relies heavily on imports. The traditional diet includes many soy-based products such as tofu, soy sauce, and soy-based drinks, all of which benefit from clean, high-protein soybeans. Canadian soy's characteristics match well with the country's industrial processing standards, offering both quality and safety assurances that local producers require. The Canadian advantage in the Philippines is multifaceted. First, the logistical reliability of Canadian ports, coupled with strong documentation and batch traceability, gives importers confidence in every shipment. This is crucial for a country often dealing with typhoons and logistical challenges. Having predictable delivery timelines helps prevent costly production interruptions. Secondly, the Canadian soybean industry has demonstrated a unique willingness to understand and adapt to local Filipino tastes and technical needs. This includes working directly with food manufacturers to determine the optimal soybean varieties for local dishes, conducting workshops on soybean storage in humid climates, and collaborating on product development efforts. As the Filipino government pushes forward with its food self-sufficiency and security initiatives, Canadian soy is poised to become an integral part of that vision. With education campaigns around plant-based nutrition and strong NGO support for sustainable imports, Canadian soybeans are not just another commodity in the market. They're seen as a dependable solution aligned with the country's development goals. Taken together, the shift to Canadian soybeans across these additional countries, Thailand, India, UAE, Mexico, Egypt, and the Philippines, further illustrates how the global soybean trade is evolving. These nations represent diverse geographies, economic structures, and dietary cultures, yet all converge around a common preference for a product that delivers not just on price, but on values: traceability, sustainability, consistency, and health. As global supply chains face unprecedented challenges from climate change, political instability, and consumer scrutiny, the soybean market serves as a clear case of how quality and adaptability can redefine trade relationships. Canada has not simply inserted itself as an alternative to American dominance in soy exports. It has crafted a brand of soybean farming that resonates with the future of food: transparent, responsible, and tuned to the specific needs of international markets. This shift isn't just a win for Canadian farmers, it's a signal to the entire agricultural world. In a landscape where more than just yield matters, where every step from soil to shipment can influence a buying decision, the rise of Canadian soy in these new markets reflects a broader movement toward food systems that are smarter, safer, and more sustainable. The countries embracing Canadian soy are not just adjusting their trade maps, they're investing in a better agricultural model, one that may well define the next generation of global food commerce. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on 13 countries choosing Canadian soybeans over US ones? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.